Hey everyone, today we're going to take a look at the G.I. Joe Classified Series Tripwire 6-inch Deluxe action figure. As usual, please like, share, comment, subscribe, or even hit that super thanks button. I do appreciate all engagement on my channel. Shout out to my local collector store Robo for getting this in early today, and also my buddy Raymond for lending me his copy for the review. Now, Tripwire is a deluxe action figure because he comes with a whole lot of accessories that you can see in the top right corner, and that includes Apsara, the little sniffer rat, and MACLEOD, his robotic assistant. On the package, we see all of these characters up front, performing their explosive disposal duties in a cave, and then there's an artwork of Tripwire over here with his pistol. Top of the box, we see the G.I. Joe Classified Series logo. Down to the bottom, some product information and the UPC. On the side, we get the number 78 and a QR code. Back of the box, we see the action figure with a whole ton of accessories. A couple of details on his suit as well as his helmet. More product information at the bottom. And finally, on that last side, we have a larger version of the artwork that we saw on the front. So now let's go ahead and get this one open. Out of the box, as usual, the figure is on a cardboard insert, and he comes with a box of accessories, once again with the number 78. And in this box, all the accessories are in a waxed paper baggie. So first up among his accessories, we got his backpack, helmet, and light protective collar. The light protective collar is cast in a dark gray plastic, and you can just simply slide it over his head and it sits nicely. His helmet is a snug fit. Might take a little bit of time to get on, and just making sure you push that chin strap all the way down. The helmet is cast in an army green, very dark blue paint for his visor, and dark gray paint for the chin strap, as well as his headset that goes over and above the helmet. And finally, that backpack is cast in a dark gray plastic with a little bit of panel detail on the inside. This one plugs into the hole on his back like so. The backpack has a nice couple of details like the sculpted pouches, straps, some army green paint over here, as well as the top where it looks like there's a sort of digital display with a much brighter shade of green paint over here. In the middle is where he's got some light blue paint, and this paint makes the entire backpack really pop. This is where you can also fit in some of his own explosives. These explosives are also cast in a dark gray plastic. You do have two of these that come in the accessory bag. They've got a peg on the back, and this one goes into that port on the backpack. These explosives have a very nice silver finish on the middle, and I don't think there's any place to keep the second one, but you can always have the option of him holding on to them. Next up, he also comes with two more accessories, also cast in a dark gray plastic. One is the remote control for his robotic assistant MACLEOD, and the other is a semi-automatic pistol. He's got two trigger hands, and these two hands hold on to the remote control as well as the pistol just fine. Or you can slot his pistol into the holster on the side of his right thigh. Next up, we've got his mine-sweeping device that's nicely wrapped in a cardboard piece that keeps the whole mine-sweeping device straight and not warped in packaging. This one has suitable detail on it with the forearm guard over here, the operating handle, which is also painted in green, as well as the actual sensor on the bottom that's also painted in green. This mine-sweeping device has got to be paired with a dark gray plastic hose. You plug one end of the hose into the back of the minesweeper device, and the other to the port on the top of his backpack. And here he is fully kitted out with his minesweeper device. Because of the way that the hose bends, it's a little rigid, so the forearm guard doesn't want to sit nicely on his forearm, and the plastic in the handle tends to flex a little bit. But he does look impressive and quite realistic operating this mine-sweeping device. Next up, we have his cute little buddy Apsara. Apsara is cast in a brown plastic with a long tail and red paint for that harness, which is a nice look and homage to all those little heroic rats out there clearing mines in places like Cambodia. There's also a nice hit of white paint for the feet that nicely fades into the brown of the rest of the body. The body also has a realistic sort of fur texture. And finally, let's not forget, looking at the little cute face, The subtle application of white paint also fades nicely into the rest of the head, and there's also black paint for the eyes and a bit of rounded ears sculpted on. And now we're looking at MACLEOD, his robotic assistant, which is cast in a dark grey plastic and has nice details like the tracks down the sides. Now these tracks are supposed to be articulated on the actual explosive disposal robot. The front part is supposed to swivel over here so that it articulates up and down and helps the robot navigate uneven terrain. Would have been nice if Hasbro gave us that feature. However, this whole track is cast as a solid piece to the rest of the body. I also think it would have been nice to have a little bit more painted detail on these tracks. Possibly a little black paint on the wheels and gears on the inside. On the top of the robot we see a handle and also the impressive manipulator arm. So this arm is connected to a base over here with some red paint for the sensors. This arm can rotate at the base and you also have a couple of hinges. So this entire arm is pretty well articulated to carry out its battlefield duties. I do like how it kind of is able to turn around so you can have it disposing of some bombs in different situations. At the top of the manipulator arm, you have a clawed hand. Again, would have been nice if Hasbro gave us some articulation over here so that we can open and close the claws. However, these are sculpted in place. But I almost forgot to show that it does also rotate over here. So what's cool is that we have Tripwire together with his furry and robotic assistants, but that's not the end of it because he comes with even more accessories, like his heavier duty bomb disposal suit for when the situation gets really serious. Before we switch over to his heavier armor, I just want to show that you can actually stow away his minesweeping device on this clip on his backpack, and this is how we can keep all the equipment neatly together in one place and keep them aside while we switch out his armored pieces. You can unpack his default armor from the sides and simply remove them over his head like so. Now we fit the heavier armor also once again over his head and likewise clip them on from the sides. A small gripe I have is that the plastic is really soft and gummy, so it's quite hard to force these really soft pegs into those holes correctly. So you might want to find a small tool to help you push the peg in and clip the armor together. Over here I'm using a spudger just to help to force that peg into the hole so that it clips in nicely. So after a brief struggle to put on the heavier armored vest, I now put on that larger protective collar that now covers up the front of his face, and we slide on his heavy duty helmet. And now he looks ready for a very serious situation. Now to have a closer look at the heavier armored parts, the collar is cast in the dark grey plastic with a couple of details like the stitches of the seams right there on the side. To have a better look at the helmet, I'm just going to remove that collar first. The helmet is that same army green with painted detail for the ventilation system on the back and also more paint for the front protective part of the mask. I do like how the visor is painted in a glossy black. I like how it reflects the light and looks very realistic. I also do like this little bit of pale yellow paint over here. It's something different and it's a nice color that really pops against the rest of his body, which is mostly green and grey. The heavier vest is also cast in a dark grey plastic with green paint for a couple of strap details, like on his shoulders, his chest, and the sides of his abdomen. So the hits of green paint are nice and breaks the monotony of the entire grey in the vest. I do think it could use a little more hits of paint just to make it look more interesting, because there's actually a whole lot of sculpted detail, like the seams on the sides, straps down the front of his abdomen, and also some buckles on the sides as well. So a little more paint could have brought out a lot of these nice features that are already sculpted in. The back of the vest, unfortunately, has no paint at all. And I also want to point out that, once again, with the struggle of putting this vest on, the peg does seem to want to pop every now and then. Despite a little bit of warping over here, which is also a little disappointing, you have to align those holes so you can still use the rest of his equipment on this heavier armor. And yeah, now you can see the side of the armor popping open again, which is one of the more frustrating aspects of this figure, despite those really nice and plentiful accessories. So here he is in his full heavier suit, fully equipped. He looks really awesome and realistic. Definitely very evocative of the movie Hurt Locker. and he looks great together with his assistants. However, once again, I just want to point out, and I really cannot ignore my OCD, but those pegs on the side of his heavier suit are starting to pop out, especially so it's really irritating on the right side. So getting his helmet, collar, and suit off, just to have a better and closer look at the figure. I think his head sculpt is pretty nice. The dot matrix printing means he's got really sharp paint applications for all the features on his face, and I also like how the color for his lip isn't too dramatic. The expression on his face is fairly determined, but I also think it looks a little too neutral or bland. Likewise, the paint for his hair sculpt is also sharply applied, and he's got a neat hairstyle that's parted to one side with suitable detail for the couple of wisps that you can see on the top of his head. There's also flesh tone paint for his neck that matches the flesh tone plastic on his head quite well. Now his torso is a bare green plastic, no paint at all, but that's not such a big deal because he's gonna be putting on his armored vests most of the time. There's a couple of zips sculpted on his chest area. While we move on to his arms, he's got armored plating on his shoulders. This is a dark grey plastic, but once again looking a little dull because of no painted detail. His arms are also a green plastic with grey paint for his gauntlets, leading to grey plastic hands with darker grey paint for the armored pad also on the back of his hand. The rest of his torso is also that same grey plastic, but he also does have some paint for his belt area with grey for the buckle and a couple of loops on the sides. Now putting his light armor back on, just so his torso doesn't look so bare. I also do think that with all that sculpted detail like the pouches, buckles, and straps, the lighter armor could have also used a little bit more paint applications besides the green that's around his belt area and the darker grey on top of his chest. I also must say that this lighter armor is so much easier to put on compared to the heavier one that we tried on just now. The back of the lighter armor also still has some grey paint applications over here, which is a nice touch. Now onto that right arm of his, he's got his rank and designation over here painted in red, which is a nice break from the monotony of the dark grey plastic on that shoulder armor. We go down to his lower body. He's got two separate pieces of armor over here, cast in that same dark grey plastic, with also details sculpted like the straps, but once again, no paint. So it's starting to look a little boring on his legs. The green plastic of his legs are then connected to a light grey plastic for his boots. These boots have a dark grey paint on the top of the shoe, so that's also a nice touch once again. So I'll say that this figure could definitely benefit from a couple more paint applications to make it look more interesting. However, in Hasbro's defense, this color scheme is very realistic and consistent to EOD troops out there on the battlefield. So while I personally do not have much interest in the EOD units, I do think all the detail in the sculpting on this figure and his suit definitely shows quite a bit of research that Hasbro put into making this figure. So his articulation is going to get a little limited depending on which suit that he's put on. So I'm just going to show you how he moves with his lighter armor on. He's got a ball joint at the top of his head and the bottom, so you can spin his head 360. The two ball joints combine to give you a decent bit of sideways wiggling. He looks down that much and also up. Not too great, but again, with his suit on, you may not have too much use of that articulation. He's got butterfly joints at his shoulders that give you a decent range forward as well as backward. Swivel hinge at the shoulder for 360 swivel, and it does come up quite a decent bit. That armor sliding nicely over. He's got a bicep swivel, but you can't really rotate it all the way around because of his armor. Double hinge elbows with those pins concealed for very good range. Swivel at the wrist for 360 spin, as well as hinging down and up. He's got a mid-torso hinge and a ball joint at the waist. Combining them together gets you that bit of forward bend. It's nice that there is some flex in the lighter armor, so he gets that forward bend, and he also has that much range going backward. Not much range to speak of from that ball joint at the waist tilting sideways, but that ball joint definitely affords you some sideways rotation at the waist. He's got drop down ball joints at his hips, so they give you a decent bit of sideways splitting. Quite impressive considering the armored parts on his legs. And the right side is just a little more hindered because of that holster. With the drop down hips, you can also get him to have quite a good bit of range forward and backward. Definitely more than sufficient for a guy in his EOD armor. He's got a thigh swivel so you can rotate out and in. Double hinge knees with those pins concealed as well. Decent range, once again considering that armored bit. Swivel just above the calf for rotation. And he's got ankle tilt with that much range upwards and downwards. And finally ankle pivot that goes outwards and inwards. So his articulation is G.I. Joe standard, more than sufficient for you to get an EOD guy into action poses. I really do like the way he poses and looks with all his accessories put together, especially with his little furry buddy perched on his shoulder like so. For size, Tripwire stands at just over 6¼ inches, and that's about 16 centimeters. For size comparisons, here he is with a couple of the G.I. Joes. Of course, we gotta put him beside Firefly, as well as a couple of Cobra troops. For comparisons with other lines, here he is with some Star Wars Black Series, and here he is with Marvel Legends. Tripwire has an impressive array of accessories, but with that comes the double-edged sword that he's not able to carry all his gear. Part of his suit could have had more paint applications, and the heavy suit definitely feels finicky to fit onto the figure, but for what it's worth, he's a very strong and realistic entry to the classified line, and for sure, he's the bona fide EOD guy. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, subscribe to my channel, or even hit the super thanks button. Thanks for watching, take care, and stay safe.